right. So hello, everyone who's there. Again, my name is Stephen Steck from Central European University Democracy Institute. And we are now about to begin our third and final session of this meeting, which we call the pre-summit for the Real Deal project towards cohesive and inclusive citizen engagement in the European Green Deal. And the chair or the moderator today is going to be Esther Koopmanschap, and I will turn the floor over to her in 1 second. I wanted to say that considering the number of attendees we're going to have, we are intending to give all the attendees the rights of panelists, which means you can raise your hand, you can put things into the chat, you can read the chat, and hopefully we'll have an interactive discussion moving forward. So I'll be doing that as we proceed. And now I'd like to turn the floor over to Esther.
Thank you so much, Stephen. So I'm immediately sharing my screen also. So hope that works out fine and that you can see that. Welcome everybody, and welcome if you, especially also welcome if you were here yesterday, but welcome also too if this is your first session of our project, the Real Deal project. So reshaping citizens' deliberation for the European Green Deal. So that's a Horizon 2020 project. And which started already, well, we are right in the middle of the project actually, because we started already in 2021. My name is Esther Koopmanschap. I work for Wageningen University and Research. And what I would like to do, because you see another name on this slide, Ingeborg Nistroy, who is from the Research Institute for Sustainability. She is our actually our scientific coordinator of the project, and yesterday she introduced us also to the project. But of course, if you just come in today fresh and didn't join yesterday, then we thought maybe it's a good idea that I do a short recap for all of you. So that's what I would like to do. So you see it here also on in the program. So I will give you a very short recap of what we did yesterday, some of the highlights in the discussion. We have Calypso Nicolaidis with us. She will introduce herself in a bit more detail later. She will also guide us a bit further into the democratic odyssey. We talked about it yesterday with Ulrike Liebert, but today we would like to see, can we actually use also parts of the Odyssey for our purpose of today, which I will share with you in a minute as well. Let me first give you a bit of a recap, but then you see that we have a 2-hour session today. Maybe we don't need the full time, but because we are, I think, quite a cozy group, but we would like to prepare you already that we hope to have a nice interactive discussion together today of around 2 hours. If there's anything not clear, do feel free to step in, ask a question. We are fine with that because it is, we highlight a session where we would like to work together. So it's a bit of a workshop session where we roll up our sleeves. So if we talk about a bit of a recap, and Inge, I don't know if Inge is around, but Inge, I stole some of your slides and also from some of the speakers yesterday. Why the Real Deal? Why this project focusing on citizen deliberation? Well, we know, of course, that a lot is happening on citizen participation, on deliberation, but we are not there yet. It's not done, we could say, systematically and also not systemically. How citizen participation could go beyond really a one-off event is also something that we would like to push forward. Could we even talk about institutionalization? And yesterday this word came up because yesterday in the afternoon, some of our speakers also said, yeah, institutionalization, maybe that's far too strong of a word to use. Institutionalization, maybe we should talk about embedding. And maybe we should just talk about collaboration and connecting people and do that in a systematic manner and also in a systemic manner. So that's the focus also of the project. This beautiful picture I stole from the background of Yves Mathieu, who was with us yesterday. And he and others who were there yesterday had also some interesting quotes, which I would like to share with you. So some of the quotes were like, we really need to renovate our democracy. Citizen engagement should be seen as the new normal, and not by just doing one poll, for instance, but really by having events that come back, that have some regularity, and that give everybody the floor to open up. That means we need to change the decision-making game. That was also something that was shared yesterday, and create an environment of non-stop learning. So what I also liked as a very interesting quote was, make the diversity of people productive. Because of course, in the past, the EU especially worked a lot with polls. So what do some people think? But how do you make that the voice also of thousands of people? How do we do that? So how do you make this diversity of stakeholders, of citizen engagement, how do you make that productive? So some of, there are a lot of quotes that I do not highlight here, but these were some of the topics and the quotes that came up that I would like to share with you. So in the morning session yesterday, we focused much more on, well, sharing with interested parties, and we were about 40 people yesterday altogether, sharing where we are in the project, what we do more or less. And in the afternoon, we also wanted to see how does that connect then with EU policy development. So that was more the focus of the afternoon. Today, we would like to take, so that's why I leave these quotes on the screen. Within this spirit, we would like to think, how can we make a kind of protocol together? And if I say protocol, think maybe of guidance, think maybe of a toolkit, think maybe of other words that you would like to share with us. But in this mindset of the quotes that you see here on the screen, how could we move forward to developing a kind of document or guidance or set of tools that helps us to make citizen engagement the new normal? That is actually the focus of session 3 of today. This is not an easy task because this was shared with us by Clara Dazonville yesterday. And she said, because what we really try to do also, and also within this project, is bring the dimension of sustainability together with the dimension of democracy. Or maybe we can say we try to bring together green transition with just transition. And if you talk about green and just transition, there are so many, and there are even more than these, so many highlights that we should connect to. So navigating this complexity is, of course, one of the challenges we have together. That's why we have a lot of partners. So for many of you, this is very well known. For those of you who are new here today and here for the first time about the Real Deal project, we have, on the one hand, a lot of civil society organizations. On the other hand, we work with a research institute, but also with practitioners together. So that's a very good mix also for the challenges that we have ahead. So if we talk about the aim shortly and the questions that the Real Deal is dealing with, We try to connect, as I said before, sustainability and democracy. That's really the essence of the project. We try to overcome also the conflict that may exist between, on the one hand, this more normative approach of thinking of the planetary boundaries, and we have to do that because that's essential. We know this. It's 5 to 12. Many of the narratives are going around. But we would, on the other hand, also be open and share this openness deliberately. So we think of platforms that we would like to link up with platforms where citizens can come together with stakeholders. But we also like to see if you connect stakeholders on a certain topic, what can we learn from that? But how do we bring lessons learned then also to platforms where citizens meet? We also would like to think of the voices of those that are maybe, well, not that often heard, or have less of a voice, or are simply not very comfortable to speak up. So how can we involve vulnerable groups better? This is more or less schematically what our project is trying to do together with all these partners that we indicated. So in work package 1, we reviewed what is out there, what kind of approaches do we have already if we talk about participatory approaches, about citizen engagement. Work package 2 is really about mobilizing, trying to make sure that that we also create a kind of policy group together. So a group of policymakers who thinks along with us, who thinks along with citizens. So even a European civil society forum is part of work package 2. In work package 3, we try to test different formats, different events in which we really test different criteria of fairness, openness, but also effectiveness and efficiency. Based on the interaction between the work package 1, 2, and 3, we try to come up with this protocol. And about this protocol, Stephen and also Ortwin, who are with us today, they will also share with you a bit more ideas later on in the program. But this protocol, and think of it maybe as guidance, or think of it as a toolkit, or maybe you have really a totally different picture of what for you is a protocol. But for us, it helps us to give, well, maybe to give more perspective to citizen engagement, to make sure that we really change the game, or really make a start with changing the game, as Yves Mathieu said nicely yesterday. We work with 13 countries together. That was also already shared yesterday. So some EU member states, but also we go beyond EU member state. And what was very well highlighted yesterday, I just leave this slide up while I'm saying that, what was highlighted nicely yesterday was, of course, we would like to work in all countries. We would like to work across all governance levels, because that's what we also aim to do in this project. But of course, that would be a daunting task that we would not be able to do in the period we have for this project. So we made a selection not only with the number, or let's say with the formats that we would like to test, but we also focus more on specific themes that we are working on together within, whether it's a roundtable or whether it's a citizen assembly. So today, like I said, we focus especially on work package 4. You will hear a bit more about it a bit later in the program. And like I said, we have to make a selection somehow to test something and on which we can base our protocol. And this was introduced yesterday by Pia Schweitzer And she wanted to explain yesterday also, why did we come up with some formats and not with others? So we chose, for instance, for stakeholder engagement, we chose roundtables. And we would like to test also in which countries would they work, and why do they work better in this country rather than in another country, for instance. If we talk about citizen engagement, we talk more about citizen assemblies. If we talk about vulnerable groups, like I shared yesterday, then we really would like to do also some rounds of testing. It sounds very heavy, with focus groups. And in addition, we have formats where we talk about expert input, so scientific input into the debate. So we talk about expert Delphis or group Delphis. And maybe also Calypso will share a bit more about that with us at a later stage, because also we are focusing a bit more on a modular design. So how to find the right building blocks. And Calypso, in her journey, in her democratic journey or democratic odyssey, will also share with us a bit more about the modular design and approach they are actually applying, and what we possibly can use and maybe reconnect and reinforce together. So we want to know really what works where, why, for whom, and for what. And as we said, we cannot base our protocol on everything, so we had to make a few selections. And these were, for instance, if we think of the citizen engagement, if we think of the stakeholder platforms and also focus groups, these were the themes that were chosen actually to focus on. So food and health, mobility, and green economy and finance. And if we talk about green economy, that might as well include degrowth, for instance. So once again, the framework of our project, and once again also we are highlighting today work package 4. So the program for today, why are we here? Well, I hope I answer your question. We really want your brains, to pick your brains and think along with us about this protocol, about this guidance, about this potential toolkit that we are about to develop. In a few minutes, I will give also the floor to Calypso, to ask her to tell us a bit more about her democratic odyssey, and focus on the modular approach, focus on how they deal with citizen engagement. Martwin will guide us a bit more, like what research questions and empirical testing are important for a project, and then Stephen will take us through the guidance and toolkit approach as we have in mind now. But we talk a lot about testing. We would like to test that with you. And then last part of the session is more interactive. And we would like to ask you a lot of questions, like how do you see actually this toolkit? What is out there already? What do you think that we should build on? So I will stop talking but not by first introducing Calypso. So Calypso Nicolaides, Chair in Global Affairs, School of Transnational Governance of the European University Institute. You are also Emeritus Professor at the University of Oxford. We are really honored that you are here, because for us, it is essential that I think for all of us here in the room, it's really essential that we, if we really want to give democracy a place, and if we really want to change the game, that we really connect well with all these initiatives that are out there. So Calypso, thank you very much for being here, and thank you also for sharing from your side what you think we should focus on. So I will stop sharing. And Calypso, I don't know if you have a presentation that you would like us to share, or maybe you would like to share it yourself.
Thank you so much, Esther, and thank you, everyone in The Real Deal, for allowing me to connect and have this conversation, which is a conversation, as you know, that we have started for quite a while, because I think we all believe, as your presentation made so clear, Esther, that we're like sister projects, we're twin projects. And what we want today is a turning point. I mean, this meeting and yesterday, because Ulrike Liebert, my dear friend and colleague, started to discuss with you the ongoing synergies, and that's what we want to do now more. And so, you know, your presentation made clear that the Real Deal, first of all, is in a way more expensive than the Democratic Odyssey. And for those online who haven't heard about the Democratic Odyssey, we will put the link in the chat. But it's a project that is focused on the transnational, and yet and on the idea of creating a standing assembly, a permanent assembly, an institutionalized assembly. We'll come back to this question of what it means, because you raised it, Esther, very clearly. Should we not talk about systematizing, embedding? I mean, so the first point is that we are focused in a way on a prescriptive. So that's a bit different from the Real Deal, which is experimenting, right, with multi-level type of citizens engagement, linked to stakeholders. So it's different both in the fact that you're more multi-level. We believe that we can't argue for a transnational assembly without showing how it can work embedded in an ecosystem of all these levels that you're exploring. And you're also focusing on one specific area, which of course is the synergies between the Green Deal and democracy. And this is a very fundamental question about the great democratic transformation we're going in, but is it fast enough to give us, to deliver, you know, what we need for sustainability of the planet? And also, how do we overcome all the resistance out there? So we are all engaged in a kind of a journey. And we call this an odyssey because we believe it's a very long journey. Like you, we have a project, which is 2 years, 3 years, but actually we also have lives as citizens and as academics and as researchers, where we don't think our project is just now. It's a long-term story. And it's how we articulate the two that is important. Now, so our journey is more specific. It is about a pilot assembly, making a pilot assembly. And this is where, first of all, we need you, because all the lessons that you have been, and above all, you will be drawing between now and our project will continue to create this transnational assembly with a big moment in Athens in September 24, but other sessions to follow, depending on funding. So our dream and our hope is that we can draw from the experiences that you develop through the multi-level protocols that you're creating, and as well as the specific 3 transnational, whether it's virtual or in person, but virtual is also important to us. So we're clearly working on this, but at the same time now, and getting to your question, Esther, we have been working for quite a few months now on indeed a protocol. You talked about modular design. We talk about modular design or modular framework. And we indeed have a method that I think Ulrike introduced yesterday, but is very much radically open. We talk about radical openness, which means that anyone up there, and I hope everyone listening to us, can become part of our so-called constituent network, like Assemblée Constituante, that anybody, we don't have a gatekeeping system, can be that. But of course, once you're part of this network, you can decide how much you contribute. Contribute to what? Well, many things, and there will be a campaign, and we will need to articulate our campaign with your campaign. And that is, I hope, the first place where we can help you, because we've been thinking a lot about the link between what we all do and the broader public sphere. We're preparing an all-out campaign in the European Parliament elections, in social media. We have many students involved, new techniques, also hoping to, and starting to draw on, a political theater, immersive theater, and other techniques of involvement. So that's one conversation we can have. But upstream from that, I would like to share with you what we do call the modular framework or modular design. Esther, I shared the link with you in the chat. Is it possible for you to put it on the screen? Because maybe you'll give me a few minutes to navigate this. Because once you are, on our network, you can find the outlines of this modular framework. And yesterday, I think that Ulrike already shared elements of it that can be useful to you. When we have modules, so we have about 30 modules, and we're trying to think about all of them, but specifically the ones related to, indeed, what do we call co-design? How do we appeal to social imaginaries? It's a big meta questions we're asking. How specifically we engage with the public sphere, and the role of emotions. We have a whole part of our thinking about this, and what transnationalism means, because after all, we are part of, at EUI, a transnational governance school, the Florence School. So, but what I would like to suggest is many of you already are part of our constituent network, so you might be familiar with this page one. But if you know, Esther, if we can stay on it for a moment, because I just want to suggest how we're doing this, and the only way to do it is to be on it. So if you can scroll down to the page, the next page, which is the outline of the modular framework. Of course, at the beginning, we explain what this is and why we're trying to do a proof of concept. And then we have these modules. And I would like to click on one of them. You could almost choose one, Esther, in your liking. But maybe first you scroll through the whole index so everybody can see that we have 3 parts: preparing the transnational assembly, running the assembly, and then if we scroll down a bit more, you get to a third part, which is very important, of course, embedding the transnational assembly. All these questions of public sphere, political buy-in, etc. Now, once you are in, so if you can choose almost randomly, Esther, maybe I'm putting too much on your shoulders, but so once you open any module, they all have the same structure. There's a description, which we try to make sweet and short, so people don't get too bored, and not using jargon. So with the first challenge for all of us, right? That we are specialists. We think about these questions of democratic innovations like all day. We sleep, we dream them. How do you convey these things? And maybe we still have work to do on making these descriptions accessible. Then we have a set of questions under the module descriptions. In other descriptions, we'll have more questions, you'll see. And then we have a forum. And then that's the second part, where everyone can actually integrate their thinking. And maybe we'll go to, and then find when that we have what we draw from all this for the pilot assembly that will start in the summer, September, and next fall. And so in the forum specifically, we very much hope to draw. This is where, Esther, you will probably write a paragraph on, well, we just did this transnational assembly virtually, and this is the lessons we draw. And you give us one paragraph on that. Maybe we'll take a minute to go elsewhere. But if you scroll all the way down, we have 2 forums, 3 lessons from the assembly, and 4 the knowledge hub, super important, which Ulrike has been organizing and catering, and you will see that it is linked to a Zotero collection. So there is a lot of infrastructure, academic infrastructure, which we put in there. And I'm sure Ulrike has already discussed it. Now, so if you scroll down more, evaluation, or if you go to another, I'm just trying, so to go to one where we have a good examples, you also have key concepts. There are different kinds of inputs. But in the forum part, can you reach the part 2 of any of the modules? So I just want to end on this. So you will have somebody who has put input. Maybe you can go back to the index and we'll end on this, the whole beginning of the document at the very beginning. Well, you can't scroll it. You'll have to kind of click on it. There's a way to click. I can't do it. Brilliant, Esther. See, you're now familiar. So maybe click on imaginaries, the second one here, just so that I can show everyone that if you click, because once you will be part of the constituent network and you scroll down, if you can scroll to forum, and it's really good that I'm not doing it because you want to all be, so you see now there's a forum and you can put a little title and your thoughts about this from experience, from reading, from thinking. If you can scroll down a bit more, Esther, see here, there's one that I put in, then there's another one by Antoine Venn, and you can put 3 sentences or you can put a whole full page. But the whole idea is that we have a big conversation on this forum in writing and then orally through brown bag lunches. And then we, from all of this, shake well, think hard, debate more, and create the first kind of prescription for our transnational assembly. Now, all of this to say that we very much hope that the real deal, and we know, and we've discussed it already, will use this, some of those lessons for what you will do, especially the 3 transnational assemblies you do, and that in return, as it were, you put the inputs from the lessons that you learned. That's the kind of cooperation that we're looking for. There's much more to say, but my time is up, Esther, and I'd be very happy to take questions and more than questions, your own input. You can continue to scroll down. Oh, this is a long one by Antoine, dear Antoine. He wrote a very long one from Mission Publique. And then the Odyssey team. Sometimes somebody summarizes a discussion we had, right? That you can also do that. So, and very soon this will be hopefully on the web, and Decidim will help us put it on the web. So that people, when we will not have absolute direct access. If you're not part of the constituent network, you can read it, but then if you're a part of the constituent network, you just write in it. So it's very open. I think I'm going to stop there, Esther. Thank you so much for being the cruiser.
Well, Stephen was actually the cruiser, to be honest. Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you, Stephen. That was a real great double act then.
Exactly. Thank you so much, Calypso. I have now, it's so pleasant to see this also, and that you opened this for us, because this gives us, because we talked a bit and I said, can you give us some inspiration? And this definitely gives us some inspiration. So thank you very much for that, Calypso. Yeah, I have a few questions, but I would like to ask, because we should take a bit more time also to discuss a bit together. Maybe other people would have burning questions. So I would like to feel free to open up your mic. As far as I understood, Stephen, everybody can also ask questions, because when we took also the attendees with us very closely together with the panelists, so everybody can open up their questions.
Some people declined. Some people declined to be participants, but that's fine. If you raise your hand, we can still allow you to speak. Anyone who would like to be a participant or a panelist, just send me a message or raise your hand or put it into the Q&A. Okay?
Yeah. So, and maybe Brooke, can you share this document with everybody? Because that was the link that was shared earlier by Calypso.
Actually, I want to answer Else's question. That we have a website called the Democratic Odyssey. I'm going to put the link right now. Oh, yes, it's been put. Esther, you've put the link. So what you all need to do, rather than simply go to the document, because this is simply for this meeting, but just for our purposes, we would be hugely grateful if you just go to our website, and then there is a little button that says Join the Odyssey. You just join it, and then you're part of the constituent network, and then you access the document. I mean, of course, you can do it now, but it's, for us, it's nice to know, who's this person, simply to keep track, as opposed to gatekeeping. So if you can just register, that would be brilliant. And then you'll have access to.
And maybe then, that's great. I already became one of your constituents 2 days ago or 3 days ago, I think. So I'm there now. Thank you for that. One question: you have a lot of milestones of course, in your imagination already. What is one of the most important ones in the near future? Also for us to give a bit of a thinking, deep thought about what we should expect and how we can link up with our sister project.
Well, we will share very soon in our website a timeline, which will be really hard, but you'll see it's kind of nice, and you will see that the real deal is right in our timeline. So you're part of our timeline, because we have really paced the steps towards a sortition moment. So that concrete milestone is when we do sortition in the spring, and there's a lot of question mark. I mean, I should underline this, because that's exactly the same for you. We know that democracy is organic, and we are doing experiments, so we can't plan everything in advance, although of course that's the Horizon 2020 kind of mindset, which is interesting, let's put it that way. But we know that this whole process is kind of open-ended. Nevertheless, we have this sortition, which we don't know exactly how it's going to connect with the panels of the EU, and how we can use some of the sortition pools that they will create. I mean, I'm not going to get into details, but we're having these brown bag lunches every other Friday to discuss exactly that with whoever wants to connect from the constituent network. So one thread is how the sortition process and how we do it, because we want to tell a story about it. This is very important, and I think very much shared with the real deal. How do we tell a story? The sortition can't be made by specialists in secret. I call this the pedagogy of randomness, because if you were sitting in Athens or in a Middle Eastern country in 2,500 years ago, they totally understood randomness, and that is the best ticket to chance, to equality and justice in their society. I don't know, a ship arrives in the port, and who's going to be employed to take it random dice or whatever the equivalent was part of in our societies. We've lost this, right? We know this. So the first thing we want to do when we do citizen assembly, mini publics, and all this is to reacquaint ourselves as the public sphere with randomness. So I would say, for me, that is the first kind of challenge. And then there are many other challenges: how we facilitate, how you convey that, how you connect to the broader public, how do you bring in experts. All of these we're thinking through. And this is where I believe that the connection with the real deal has to be symbiotic, totally symbiotic, because we're asking very much all the questions you asked, Esther, in your introduction.
Yeah, no, the randomness is good to keep in mind. Let's do another question, Pia.
Yes, hello. Thank you very much for this overview and introduction to the project and to the Democratic Odyssey. That's really, I see lots of synergies, but I also see, maybe it's just my understanding, but I think there is one slightly different emphasis, let's put it that way, with regards to the role of scientific evidence. For us in Real Deal, this premise that decisions need to be made one way or another, but in an inclusive way, in a democratic way, in a more sustainable way, is of course ideal and preferred. But there is also this issue that scientific evidence is needed to scope the the potential to act within the planetary boundaries, to search for ecological integrity in these kinds of things. And based on your introduction and what I've seen on the web of the Democratic Odyssey, there is a slightly different emphasis for the Democratic Odyssey. In my understanding, this democracy comes first, and then further as a building block, this scientific evidence through expert advice or whatever comes in a bit later. So it's a different emphasis. And I'm wondering, first of all, if I understood this correctly, and please, correct me if I'm wrong, I'd be most grateful. And the other thing is, if these different emphases are correct, then how can we exchange thoughts, compare notes on how this can be, how we can work together on this? Because I do think, especially with regards to the rise of populism and these kind of things, these post-truth societies, that even in that climate, we need to tackle the issue of declining trust in institutions, declining trust in science, but still with the tension that we need to adhere to the planetary operate within the planetary boundaries. So I see this issue, this conundrum. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Pia, and also for the wonderful work you're doing in this whole process. Now, first of all, in terms of emphasis, probably you're overemphasizing the difference. I think the first difference is certainly that the real deal is focused on, as an area, which of course is at the core of much of the other area we worry in the world, and where expertise is absolutely key. But on the other hand, I would say that in many areas, expertise is key. When we looked at the panels, the panels on food waste or virtual worlds, or all of the panels, or coffee, which met in Florence, as you know. In any of the areas, of course, citizens do need as much input as possible. And if you scroll down, or if you click on the document, you will see, first of all, it comes up in several modules, but we have a whole module that is called expertise. And in this module, as you will see, we ask questions about who will select the experts, how do they participate, the usual question, but also how to democratize and, in our view, introduce politics in experts' input. So, what is the role of AI? How do you make a training kit? We have all of these questions. And if you scroll down to forum, one of our wonderful team member, Adélie, has worked a lot on this, because she's, as an academic, written on the role of expertise, and she was co-managing in Florence Coffee. And so, there are a number of lessons. Aliénor, the same. I myself observed all of these panels and written a long paper on the panels, and including the expertise. So this is just simply to say, many in the team of the Democratic Odyssey really ask the question of expertise. And there I will push back the question to you. How will we, you and us, address the question of several questions about expertise? One is agonistics. How much do we want to, for the citizens for the expertise to be shown to be contested, not by climate deniers, of course, but, so it's within boundaries. But we all know that citizens' engagement, is more intense and involved if you show that there are disagreements and how they can. There is a question about maybe an overemphasis on very early consensus building. How early do you build consensus, and how do the experts help that? How much of the expertise is shown to be, not from gods in the sky, but imprecise? And, not only there's disagreement, but even when you agree, you also agree on the imprecision of your expertise, on risks, on scenarios. One of my big themes the day before, I was participating in ESPAS, this big foresight conference organized by the EU institutions. And of course, one of the big themes I try to push is how you enlarge their circles. It's a circle of super specialists. How do you democratize foresight? And one of the ways to do it would be to have citizen assemblies engage in, the techniques of scenario planning, some very different scenarios, which I think is part of what we're going to explore together, right? So when you have the major conflict of end of the month, end of the world, how do you organize a conversation about this with experts who, emphasize more the social versus the just versus the planet? I mean, we know their tensions, and we know that what we're doing is because citizens need to own the difficult choices. But often I find that the experts try to erase the difficulties of these political choices. So what I'm trying to say is that, Pia, I mean, I want to hear what you think, and what you're going to do in the real deal about this, because we really want to ask those really hard questions about expertise. But for us, it's crucial to have expertise in the process. And I hope, can I say, that you write a paragraph in the forum.
That was my suggestion. Because this is a beautiful topic, and I like how you stress, indeed, maybe we are emphasizing consensus. Very shortly, Inge, because Pia, Inge, all of us, we need to start writing and have this discussion. I think it's beautiful. Inge, please.
Yeah, I want to second Pia and come in on this planetary boundaries thing. Indeed, expertise, input of expertise, and the way of input of expertise is very essential to all mini publics and so on and so forth. And that goes in principle for all topics. But for us, there is a kind of a, if you want to say, hierarchy of topics. With the planetary boundaries, the natural resource base is the basis of all. If we don't do this, humanity goes extinct. The other thing, a similar thing I can think of for other topics, is a nuclear war, where we also know that humanity goes extinct. The other is maybe a meteorite where we don't have an impact on. So that's why we say this is so much the key and the underlying to address this tension, where something we have to respect. We have to make policies within this framework of the planetary boundaries. There is no negotiation about the planetary boundaries. A bit, again, the same, the other I can only think of is nuclear war, I was also in the ESPAS conference. The foresight people are a lot about geopolitics and security politics. So I just wanted to add that this is a bit the difference, if you want to say so, or something we strongly come in this link with the democratic odyssey.
Great.
Yeah, I mean,
thank you very much.
Oh, sorry.
Short, Calypso, go ahead shortly, and then we move on.
I mean, I'm trying to find a word rather than difference. It's that kind of the huge value added of the real deal for us, the Odyssey, where we're cross topics. In fact, we're discussing how this first, the assembly we envisage, it will take up many topics and many conversations if it's institutionalized, in the EU, and that's the dream. And of course, planetary boundaries and how we deal with it will be central. So the point is, you're like at the frontier, and you're asking but let me just say two things here, because you talked about nuclear, Inge. When I teach nuclear, or I do it together with climate change and biodiversity extinction as existential threats. And one of the things I really try to think hard about is the role of the imaginary. And there are scholars, in critical theory, critical IR, that really emphasize that, alongside experts, it's not opposite. It's like two intertwined roads. But imagine a world, where the nuclear has happened. Imagine a world where there's zero pollination, mosquitoes, and where we are 3 degrees more. Imagine a world where we have 1 billion climate refugees. Now, close your eyes, students. Sorry, I'm just like you need to imagine that world before even you hear the experts. Because the experts, they give you curve, and you have that curve that becomes exponential, and it touches the y-axis on the right, and you're like, Okay. But part of the story, I mean, I discuss this a lot with my daughter, who is a very intense climate activist, has paid a lot for it. And she agrees that we still need a story, we activists, she says, and in a way, I think we're all academic activists. At least that's how I think of us. We're academic activists in some ways. We have our analytical hat, which we have all our very, very systematic protocols, and that's what you're going to do for the rest of the day and for the rest of the month and years. Yes, we are rigorous, but at the end of the day, we also have a crusade, a journey. So, we're trying to transform the world, not just to analyze it. That's what we're doing. And I don't think if we can do it, if we don't appeal to how people can, and the young generations, they do it. That's why they're in despair. I think our generation needs to do it more. I mean, I say our, I speak for me. I'm not for everyone on the screen, but I'm 61, and I'm like, I wake up every morning imagining more and more, So yes, expertise, but also imagination. And then the second thing I wanted to say is that the experts, the role of experts and planetary boundaries, the question it becomes, in a way it's connected, but the pedagogy of expertise is really something key that we need to think about, and related to the question of imagination. So, I'd have much more to say about this, but let's continue the conversation. Sure. And it's only one module, right? Well, the module on expertise, the module on imaginaries, and it's one part of your modular design too. So very, very important for the collaboration that we're building together.
Calypso, thank you so much, because this has been actually very inspiring. And I feel we need to have these discussions. Well, maybe we should join your Brownback every other Friday, indeed. How the sister projects are interacting on randomness, on pedagogy, on democratic foresight. Would be a very fascinating journey together then. Calypso, thank you so much. If you are able to stay on, you are very welcome. But we are going to dive into rolling up our sleeves and actually diving into the protocol, maybe guidance and toolkit, that we are about to unroll in front of us. Ortwin, you gave us your reflection on our research questions for the real deal. Would you mind to shortly remind also the people that were not there yesterday to remind us about these research questions, because it links so much to the protocol? Then Stephen will take us through the protocol, and then we are going to dive into some questions together. And if you maybe unmute, then we hear you as well. But we see your slides already. We don't hear you yet, Ortwin. Ortwin, we see the slides, but we do not hear you yet.
Okay.
Yes.
Now I think
there you are.
Yes. Sorry. Yes. There were some problem here, but I hope you can see now my little slides. And I very welcome everyone for the second day of our deliberation about real deal. And what I would like to pose this morning is to tell you a little bit about the three major research questions and how we would like to tackle these research questions. And I think some of them have already been mentioned specifically by Pia just in the first round of discussion. And one of the really major questions is, which is seen here, how can we overcome and resolve the potential conflict between respecting the planetary boundaries. Inge just pointed that out. We need to respect those boundaries for reaching a sustainable future, but at the same time preserve openness, democratic sovereignty in our governance institutions and processes. And that's, I think, it's a major question. We know that we should not trespass these planetary boundaries for obvious reasons. On the other hand, if we have already the result of a participatory process, then we don't need the participatory process, and we can just, do what these planetary boundaries demand from us. But what we can see is even if you want to respect planetary boundaries, there are different options, different strategies, there are different priorities that we may take. And of course, those are the ones that we can have a good democratic discussion, debate, that we need to feed them into the discourse. And what has been coined the analytic deliberative discourse, it comes from the US academies, first I think in 1996, and now had been a whole report in 2008. And it says what we do need is first an input by scientists about the ecological boundaries, and that we also know a little bit more about the impacts of different policy options to avoid these planetary boundaries, or to stay within the realm of what these planetary boundaries still give us in terms of degrees of freedom. And then once we know what policy options are available and what kind of impacts they have and what we should not do, because that would trespass the planetary boundaries, have a deliberative balancing of options by democratic bodies, so it could be parliaments, but and that, of course, is a focus of Real Deal, to do it with participatory formats. That means we would like to include the stakeholders, who are organized groups, but also the average citizens, and even those citizens that normally are not part of the decision-making process, a lot of disadvantaged groups, marginalized groups, and others. They should really be part of that. Now, what was already said, I think, by Stephen and also by Esther, within Real Deal, we cannot, deal with all those issues at the same time. So what we're trying to do is we should get the input by scientists through Delphi workshops, which gives us a little bit of a better distribution of what we know or what kind of consensus we have about planetary boundaries. And that will be then fed into deliberative bodies. That could be roundtables or citizen forums or citizen assemblies. And that should be an interaction between the two. So it's not just that they give the planetary boundaries and they are taken for granted, but rather that there is a discussion between the analytic and the deliberative part. We will do this specifically with roundtables, with organized groups, because they have a lot of interest. So it's much more interesting to see how they deal with these planetary boundaries. And the input comes from Group Delphi. But we also want to see how roundtables interact with citizen assemblies. That leads me to my second research questions, and that is, how can we assure that representatives of marginalized or disadvantaged groups in society become an integral part of participatory processes? And how can a fair and adequate integration of different and sometimes conflicting positions be accomplished? And that's something, we've always say public participation, but the public doesn't exist. So we have many publics, and we have many different groups. In a plural societies, you also have different interest groups, but also different values, different preferences. So what we need to do is, of course, to make sure first, it's what we call inclusion, that all of these different interest, values, preferences, knowledge camps are represented. But secondly, we need also closure. We need to find out, can we make sure that when it comes to political decision making, which of course is collectively binding, that all of these are adequately considered? And that, of course, is a major challenge. So what can we do? Well, the one thing is what we found out is that it's pretty good to have a combination of different formats. One of them is to combine focus groups with citizen assemblies. Why is that good? Well, the citizen assemblies is probably the best way to assure heterogeneity over a large heterogeneous group of people, because we just take a random sample, although there is an equal chance for each citizen to be selected. We know that 90 out of 100 do not follow our invitation. That's, of course, it's a major issue. We need to see that, and that very often groups that are marginalized or disadvantaged don't feel empowered to honor the invitation, even if we're trying to persuade them to come. What we can see, however, is if we take those disadvantaged groups as a group in itself and do focus groups with them, and that we reach a critical mass of these people, then they just feel more comfortable in a kind of participatory format, and that's why we call them focus groups. So there are groups of people like me and you and so they represent a critical mass of each of the groups that we would like to address. For example, people with disabilities, or people that have a different sexual orientation, or whatever it is. But they feel now they're not just like in a zoo, the only exemption from anybody else, but that they have others, similar people around them. That's very important, and it's very productive. But of course, those are only group votes, and they need to be somehow reflected by larger groups, and that could be either a citizen assembly or even also a roundtable with stakeholders. Thirdly, and I think I mentioned that again, it's very important to say that we may have a conflict between interests and values. Interests are what people feel is really benefiting them, and normally if you talk about benefits, or organized groups that know very well what kind of benefits they are looking for. So those are organized stakeholders. The other thing is, if you take random selection of citizens, they're not there because they have a specific interest. They're there because they want to represent the common good. They want to represent the basic values in society. Also, they're plural, but still the kind of base is not feed my interest, but trying to find a commonly good and valuable solution. And there may be differences between kind of an interest representation, a value representation. And again, we need to see how we can resolve this. Now, again, we cannot do the whole program that's being set here for the potential solution under A, but we want to operationalize it in real deal. So we do focus groups and with critical assemblies of selected marginalized and disadvantaged groups. Of course, not all of them. So we did one, for example, for young women with low income and with children. So they have a specific, I think, experience in life. And so it's very important to get their experience somehow heard in the discourse about Green Deal. We also feeding these results of focus groups into citizen assemblies, but also into round tables, so that these people know, if those people are not represented there, very often they're not, that their voice is being heard there and actually being taken into account. And then, as I said, we also want to have interaction between round tables and citizen assemblies. That leads me now to the third question, and that's, of course, a question that's also at the heart of the European deliberative strategy, and that is, what is the appropriate vertical governance level? And when we talk about vertical governance, then we mean from the community, or even part of the city through the region to the province, or some countries called land, or country, EU, UN. They're all different governance levels with different authorities, with different responsibilities, and they all have to interact, as we know, for example, by the subsidiarity principle. And so what kind of policy issues and measures, and how can outcomes of different vertical governance that will be integrated for a common EU policy process? And that, of course, is not only true for any participatory body, it's also true for the legal decision-making bodies like parliaments and executive agencies and so on. The potential solution is vertical integration of participatory formats. So we should organize participatory formats on each governance level: community, region, province, country, EU, even UN. and we should allocate topics to these different vertical governance levels depending on who is actually legally responsible for the issue at hand. Sometimes there are several levels, sometimes there are only one, sometimes part of it is one and part is another. So that can be very complicated, but it's fairly important, because if you want to have participatory formats that inform policymakers, we need to know what kind of policymakers at what governance level is really going to be addressed. And then we also have to integrate it, because definitely at the end, the EU has to make a decision that pleases the communities, the region, the province, the country, and the EU as a whole. So in that sense, this kind of integration is also a very important task. Now, within Real Deal, we're not able to really test that, because that would really mean a multi-year effort to do something on each level and then trying to integrate it and then try to define the right decision makers at each point. I think it's a very important element, but unfortunately, that is beyond our reach. So there's neither the time nor the resources to organize a series of participatory formats on different governance levels. So what we can do is we can look at the literature. We can also look at some of the outcome of the testing, but we can only simulate, either by conceptual delineation, literature review, or some of the other experimental outcomes that we can accomplish through answering the other two questions. And then we will integrate the different participatory formats. And again, it will be partially simulated, of course, at the Group Delphi in Work Package 4. So that's different from the Group Delphi in Work Package 3. It's where we have all the experts coming together and help us to interpret the results. So we'll give the question number 3, those Group Delphi participants. And also we'll discuss it in the summit and in the Civil Society Forum, Work Package 2. So this is an area where we look at what we know already about the third questions, what we can collect within the European community, within each country, within each region, and then trying to find a good answer for our protocol for orientation at the end. So my last slide is then just a review. What are we doing? Yes, we have 3 different groups that we want to integrate: normal citizens, experts, stakeholders. And there's an issue of reaching something like consensus, but we also want to make sure that we have enough diversity, give voice to those that don't have a voice. Voting, we don't think is a good thing to do, and so we start seeing that as necessary, because basically if you have participatory bodies, they do not represent something in a statistical sense, so voting is really a problem. So what we do, we have citizen panels, jury assemblies, basically the same thing. We have experts, Group Delphi, we use that one because it calibrates expert judgments, and stakeholders, the usual round table. And then we have, of course, a diversity in which you have focus groups. We will basically make sure that we have experts with very different opinions at the Group Delphi and also in the round table. And we combine this, as I said in the beginning, with an analytic deliberative discourse, analytics showing what are the planetary boundaries, what is science telling us about them, what are the impacts of different policy options, and how can we deal with that, and then leave it to the deliberative bodies, round tables, citizen panels, assemblies, or others, to do the deliberation, to say, yeah, how do we develop trade-offs, how do we resolve trade-offs? I think that then will be an important element at the end. So we can drop this. So thank you very much for your attention, and I'm very happy to answer any questions and also to engage in a more thorough discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ortwin. I think that sets very well the scene for us to start thinking about all the challenges that we have ahead, the planetary boundaries, so what binds us, in fact, and the openness, the deliberation that we want on the other hand, interests versus values, the voice of marginalized groups, but also the third question that you focused on, Ortwin, indeed, how do we integrate this? And it would be beautiful if we have all these financial resources, if we can link national level with European level, with global level, with regional level, local level. So indeed, these are the 3 research questions. we wanted to, they were shared yesterday, but we wanted to set the scene again before we start really diving into our protocol. Are there any questions at this moment? Is there anything that you find difficult, unclear, disturbing? Then let us know. I see one question. Inge, you would like to highlight something? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to add to the last bullet on the vertical slide that we also will try to feed in the results of national deliberations to the EU level assemblies, where this roughly fits. I mean, the EU level assemblies have broader themes as well. I think that's how it's planned. And there will be then from the fitting underlying themes, whatever. If we have an assembly about the future of the European Green Deal as a very broad theme, conceptual, policy-oriented, we can then come in with results on specific topics like food. And then I have a question on this slide with all the formats and the consents and dissents. I mean, I understand that roundtables do aim at a consensus, but same as in a group Delphi, you can of course end with the result, which is this is where we have consents and this is where the rest where we all have dissents, or how is that?
Yeah, agree to disagree. Here
Yeah,
we
right.
agree to disagree.
Yeah.
Arthur.
Yeah, thank you very much, Inge and Ethra. You know, I think in the beginning, when we had all these participatory bodies, we were very much optimistic about reaching consensus. And I think it's still a very good accomplishment if you get a consensus, because then it's kind of a situation where everybody would feed into his or her support to one of the policy options. Over time, we have learned that very often, if you push too hard for consensus, we only get trivial results. So then we say, okay, you know, we need to be more sustainable, we need to be, you know, more inclusive and everything else, but we just avoid any conflict. And that, of course, doesn't help. So I think in later times, we have seen that it's just as important to see that there are kind of equally well argumented options. But it's very important to agree, as you said, Esther, to disagree, but not only that to disagree, that we have a good way of making an argument why we disagree. And very often it's not because we have different values, but we just have different relative weights that we attribute to each value. So nobody is against environmental quality, nobody is against economic performance. But the way is what is more important and how much it is more important, that is very often people disagree. And so I think what's very important, and that's part, I think, of the democratic process, even in a deliberative democracy, to say, okay, now we know the arguments for option A, we know the arguments for option B, and then it's up to the legal decision makers to say, look, you know, my political program is more in favor of option A because those are the arguments that really link very well with my political program, and I can be reelected or not. But at that point, if it's well argued from both sides, then 51% is better than 49%. And then majority votes make sense. Majority votes without debate doesn't make sense. So in that sense, I think we are really enriching the discourse with participation and making sure that all the arguments are heard. And then if there are really tough choices to make, yes, that is part of life. We cannot do everything in parallel, and there are scarce resources and whatever. But then I think the losing party knows, well, their arguments have been respected, they have been taken into account, they have been really deliberated, but in the end, only one side could actually make it to the final decision. I mean, if we don't have a zero-sum game, we can, you know, try to get win-win situations, but very often that's not possible. And I would really advocate that these participatory bodies are not just good if they reach consensus, they're just as good, much more even better, if they reach something like a good package for option A versus option B versus option C. And then everybody, the electorate, can say, okay, you know, they all have positive and negative impacts, and I choose the one that fits most my preferences.
Beautiful. Yes, I think that's a very nice summary, Ortwin. Thank you so much. Because with this mindset, to keep this all in mind, we are now going to dive into, Stephen, what is our mission actually in this project to develop a protocol? What do we have to do? And then how we shape it, that we would like to do it together with you. But Stephen, some introduction for us.
Thank you, Esther. So that we still have some time to have our open discussion, I'll try to be as quick as I possibly can here. And let me start by sharing my screen. Here we go. Yeah. So here we are in this working session on the guidance in the toolkit, and I'm highlighted in red some of the things which are our focus today. So for this protocol, some of the goals that we talked about for the meeting today, we've already met. So we've done the overview of the Real Deal project. We've established the linkages that was yesterday afternoon between the EU policy development targets and milestones and the protocol. And now we are in the third session to provide pointers for scoping and planning, the scoping and planning mechanism for the work on the protocol, such as the identification of end users, and also to provide input towards a preliminary outline of the protocol. So those are our goals for the rest of this session. And then the objective overall of our work package is, again, the red part, to elaborate these recommendations of meaningful, effective, representative, inclusive, gender-sensitive, youth-sensitive, and impactful citizens and CSOs participation and deliberation. That's the overall objective. And now, looking at the tasks that are before us, here is the description from our grant agreement of the task of developing the protocol, which we also call guidance and toolkit, which is to create this important, powerful, and effective set of tools that would be inclusive, as we said, context sensitive, and which also has a practical impact in terms of the selection and variety of various tools which we are going to be presenting through this protocol. Also, there's a section about, showing what is the legal basis for the various formats, the procedures, as well as those where there may not yet be a strong legal basis, which was something we encountered in developing the handbook, but for which there is, let's say, a desire to use these tools for the achievement of some of the goals which are set through the European Green Deal. And now this is again a bit more of the description. I think probably we've already covered this, so we can skip ahead already. Yeah, here's the stakeholders. That's very important. So the policymakers are some of the stakeholders we're targeting here, people who are end users from agencies, also civil society organizations, the research community, and those who are conducting the participatory processes themselves or the consultative processes themselves. Okay. Now, we did start the work already on identifying some of the resources that are out there and the gaps, which are the ones that people who are involved in our project, the Real Deal project from our consortium, have identified as important gaps to be filled. So in doing that, we have come up with a preliminary list. These are obviously, this is not everything, obviously. And what we would like to do is to have you look at these and also to say which of these you think are particularly important for us to be taking into account, as well as what is not covered by the resources which are already out there, and that is the gaps. And here on the next slide, I'm going to show you some of the gaps which have been identified. Some of these are more or less placeholders for particular issues to be aware of, but some of them are actually rather specific. And again, For the ones that are rather specific, we want to understand whether these are indeed gaps that we should be filling through our protocol development, through the guidance in the toolkit, and among the ones that we should be focusing on, which are the most important, which are the gaps which are, let's say, most critical to those who are end users, potential end users of this guidance and toolkit. So just to, I think, show you one thing, just because we were talking about the handbook yesterday, and just to quickly show you again and I will again share my screen just to show you quickly again the handbook and how it looks. You can find it online. Just one second. I hope I can find it. Yeah, here we go. So this is where how it looks online. You can click on the downloads there. Right now we have the project deliverable up on the website. We're also making it into a more user-friendly report. As I mentioned, I did want to show you just the yeah, here we go. Table of contents. In order to do that, I've got to share again something else. And this will be the last thing I show you. Right, so here you can see the table of contents. I had shown you just the headlines yesterday, the main sections, but here you can see a little bit more detail. The back, again, this is all online, you can find it. A little bit more of the background, the obligation to engage citizens, connection between the European Green Deal and the SDGs, the variously highly developed legal framework for participatory rights, which has a long practice in Europe and around the world, the 5 dimensions of environmental governance, which have been developed through some other projects that have been implemented or supported by the European Commission, transparency, participation, access to justice, which are very participatory in their scope, also compliance, assurance, and accountability, and effectiveness and efficiency. The various mechanisms which are have a fairly large practice which relate specifically to the European Green Deal, public participation, access to justice, and transparency again. And then some practices for consultative and deliberative mechanisms, things like the nexus approach, strategic environmental assessment, and then the other methods, including citizen assemblies and related experience in Europe, which is really what we are developing further through this project. So just to show you that. And then I'm going to stop here, and I'm going to now pass, if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them, but then I'll be passing the word back to Esther so that we can get down to work.
Thank you so much, Stephen. I don't know if there are any questions. Yes, Ulrike, you have a question. Please go ahead.
Good morning. Thank you so much.
Morning.
I actually have 2 questions. One question is to Ortwin Renn. Is he still around?
He is here, yes.
Oh yeah, hello. I think one of the gaps which you mentioned upfront is the bridging the governance levels, the multi-layered governance levels. And I wanted to link this to a remark and what I understood yesterday from Laurence Graf, where she said that we are really in a very crucial phase now, where the European Green Deal legislation sealed in Brussels needs to be implemented by the member states. And as this will be a process which is very lengthy, 3 years, and includes the local and the regional level according to internal structures. So I'm wondering how you, and I'm really interested and curious how you want to tackle this, since your project, as I understood, will be finished at the end of next year. Is this? Yep. And so your toolkit, your protocol, in a way, could and ideally might prescribe also for policymakers, legislators, administrators in this process of Europeanizing, of implementing the Brussels sealed climate pact, how to go for them. So I think this will be very crucial to make this a success. And the second question to Stephen, your handbook was very helpful that you showed and I will look it up and will read it, of course, that you showed us the contents, and there in chapter 5.4, among other practices, you mentioned citizens' assemblies. And I would be very interested in whether you are also covering first examples of how citizens' assemblies are institutionalized, legally speaking. So, for example, the Brussels one, which has a permanent status. I assume this is not anymore a practice that can vanish with the next elections. So I would be very interested in whether you want to flesh this out, or this is really a concern of yours. Thank you.
Great. First, Ortwin, maybe?
Yeah, well, thank you very much, Ulrike. I think that's a very interesting and very challenging question. And we had a couple of pan-European citizen assemblies in the past, and very often their results were given to the European Parliament, and the Parliament said, well, actually, this is not our responsibility, it's a commission. And so, then it was very frustrating for everyone, because the Parliament had actually issued those, but then told basically the citizens, what you've said is very interesting, but we are not responsible, or this is something that's outside of our area of responsibility that goes back to the nations. We can go back to the different nations or even different regions. So I think it's very crucial to map what kind of issues and topics are being taken by what kind of authorities in the vertical governance levels. And that's changing, as you said. I mean, that's one of the things which makes it difficult. But I think I think in the protocol, when, my feeling is that when you say, what are the preliminary kind of pre-assessment things that you need to do, is to say, well, what is a topic that you really need to address? Who is responsible for this topic in what kind of, different elements? And again, we can see that a lot of authorities may be responsible, but for different parts of it. So saying often, let's say, regulation is done by the EU, but inspection is done by the states, and the compliance is done by the judicial system. So, so it's not that easy, to address the right person there. And, the more complex it is, the more difficult it is. But, it's unavoidable. And that's something I think we need really to make sure to address, because one of the things that we also experienced in the last a couple of decades is that people are easily getting tired and even disappointed or frustrated, and even may just feel totally disenchanted from democracy when they feel they have invested a lot of work, a lot of time, and then nobody cares for it. That's the worst thing that can happen. And so, and it's not bad will. It's not, I've been to some of these parliamentary things where, the people said, we would like to do it, but we can't. It's not our task. It's not our responsibility to do that. And it's not our mandate. So in that sense, we have to be very clear when we design these processes, who is the addressee to what, and also the timing, of course, also very important, as you said. I mean, what time does that kind of recommendation needs to be there in order to be really productive in terms of policy making. This is very abstract. I know that it's not that easy, and we can, of course, look into different policy domains like mobility, agriculture, and so on, and climate change, where we may have, different arenas in which all of this is happening. But we need to be very, very careful to describe the arena, specifically describe the conditions which are present when the recommendations are written. Because that's a time frame in which things happen. And if it's a bad time, if we don't know who is the addressee, or if that changes in the moment when the recommendations are being drafted, then we are in trouble. So in that sense, I think it's an extremely crucial part of it. And that's why we actually put it into the third question as, one of the three major questions, because I think it's crucial for making participatory elements work.
Okay, great. There's a lot more to say about it. I know, and that we want that also, but not now, please. Stephen, question number 2 that Ulrike asked about institutionalization
Yeah, and
and the
I'll be,
handbook.
yeah, again. So I mean, I think the a couple of things are important to take into account. The first is that most of the examples that we used were taken from the 13 countries which are covered by the project. So one of our starting points was to develop country profiles of the 13 countries, and then for those we could do a bit of a deep dive. Now, the 3 examples, particularly of citizen assemblies, that we looked at in a little bit more detail came from Ireland, Spain, and Austria. So those we have, gone into a little bit of a deep dive. We also collected a few other examples and references, but we were not trying to be comprehensive because of that, and also we were looking, more on the national level as well. Because that was where we generated our information and our data. However, the other thing was that the focus of the handbook was meant to be a snapshot of the legal and institutional situation. So one of our first decisions at the beginning of that part about that task was that we would be looking at those. We would be distinguishing, let's say, between participatory type rights-based approaches where there was a clear legal and institutional framework, and those which were more deliberative, consultative, where there was less of a strong legal and institutional framework, and things which were at that time still being tried out in different formats. We looked at all 12 of the specific formats that were identified in the first work package, and we were trying to extract as many examples of those as we could, and that you can find a little bit more about that in the 13 country profiles.
Understand.
So I think that would be as much as I could say about it at this moment, but we do want to, that's one of the things, is we want to cover this in a much more comprehensive way through the development of the guidance and toolkit.
Oh, great. Thank you, Stephen. Maybe you can also put a link in the chat that can go to everyone, where people can find the handbook, because it is online indeed. Not to do an exam, but maybe it feels a bit that way. I'm going to share my screen, and on my screen you see a square code. And if you don't like square codes, that's also okay. Then I can also share with you a link, which I will put in the chat, and I will ask Brooke, can you please share that with everybody? I hope that you all know how a square code works. If not, then go to bookclap.com, and in the chat you see the event code that you need to fill out. So don't worry, it's not an exam, but I would like to ask you some questions that Stephen and I prepared, specifically on the toolkit. Sorry, I shouldn't say toolkit, because that's actually the first question, maybe. So if you are all in, if you are all ready, we are going to ask all of you a few questions so that we can go over some discussion points for the last half hour. So if you are all in, I give you all a few seconds more. Stephen, if you can make Brooke co-host, then we can share but I'm going to
Just restored it, yeah.
Yeah. So if you are all there, I'm going to the first question. The first question is very easy. Are you all there? I'm going to continue. The first question is very easy. How are you today? It's just to see if you are in and to see if this works. I got one answer. A bit tired. Sorry for that. Great. Happy to hear. Any other remarks? How are you today? Bit tired. Okay, not too bad. That's also good. Some people excited, maybe. Interested. Nice. Great. Nobody grumpy yet. I'm happy. Although feel free to share if you are grumpy. Yeah, so you can't do this wrong. It's not an exam, don't worry. So when you are all there, I'm going slowly. So you can do this either on your computer or on your phone. I'm going to the first real question. And for those who are a bit tired, we will just end up in this interactive session by pulling up some questions, getting your thoughts, really to stimulate that we can think together on what is actually this protocol and what is its goal. So I'm going to the next question. So if you couldn't indicate yet, it will vanish from your screen. Sorry for that, but I hope I can slowly move forward. So the next question. We said, Stefan highlighted it too, it's in our grant paper also, so in our proposal, we said, well, a protocol for me, for us as a project, it means something like guidance, something like toolkit. But maybe you have a totally different view. Maybe you would say, well, it's not a guidance and toolkit, it's a kind of policy journey for the future policymakers who have to navigate this complexity. What do you think? What is for you? What is it for you? A protocol? Is it also a guidance and a toolkit? And everybody, even if you're in the project, feel free, just share, all of you, what is for you a protocol? What does it mean for you? Great. Maybe the word cloud is not the best way to show this, so I'm going to change the view. So general rules, I see. Orientation for policymakers of how to design an appropriate, effective, and socially inclusive citizen and stakeholder participation program. Great. A flexible outline, guidance checklist. A toolkit, but also a roadmap for progress evaluation. Great. A decision tree. Nice. Beautiful. It's a document and maybe it's a video that describes aspects that contribute to meaningful, successful participation. It's a flowchart. It's full of tips. Nice. Yeah. I'm going to go down in the screen so that you can see the first one still. So a flexible outline, general rules, an orientation for policymakers, the steps to follow to carry out successful process. So yes, a guide or a rule book, decision tree, we had that, a toolkit, also a roadmap, tips, flowchart, and a way to promote deliberative democracy. Something flexible, great, yeah. So maybe something like a living document. Well, that's very helpful. Guidelines with do's and don'ts, good practices and obstacles for planning and organizing deliberative formats. Nice. An overview of advantages and disadvantages of formats and tools. Nice. Something for people or organizations who want to organize participatory events. Great, that's very nice, people, to have these different views, because for us, this will be really helpful, because we said, yeah, we don't have to ask this question actually. But actually, it's very, very helpful to see what picture is in your head, to see what you think should be a protocol, because maybe we defined its scope already too much by saying guidance and toolkit. Okay, I think not more answers are coming up, and even if answers are coming up, they are registered, so don't worry about that. And of course, you can always, and I will make sure that you have our email addresses. You can also email if maybe tonight you fall asleep and you think, why didn't I say this? Then you can always email us later. We go to the next question. Why do we need a protocol? So these are fundamental questions. And we said, yeah, it's so obvious. And still we said it's good to maybe make sure that we make it explicit for people. Also in line with what story will we tell later? What story do we need to tell, as Calypso was highlighting? Because there are, of course, in that response also different target groups that we need to address differently. So why do we need a protocol? To address different target groups. I should write that maybe. So improve the democratic deficit of the EU. Yeah, nice. What else do you think? And let me change the view so that we can see it better. A collection of modules for training. Okay, nice. Competent national policy makers. Yeah. To capture the lessons learned from experience. Yeah. For transparency, awareness, standardization for different personas. Yeah, and different personas, maybe user groups, I guess also is meant. So we need evidence-based and practically effective formats and processes that make participation work for democratic systems. Why do we need it? Because participatory events are too often not relevant, in my opinion. Sometimes it's more for the show, it seems. Good point, yes. To make sure everyone goes through the same handling process, yeah. Address gaps regarding multi-level deliberation to give people, stakeholders, and disadvantaged groups a voice in policymaking in Europe. Yeah. To enforce justice principles more practically to ensure systematic use, implementation, and monitoring. Nice. Thank you. It's also very helpful. So to ensure the process is carried out correctly according to a universal procedure, to boost the legitimacy of consultations, beautiful, to share the results of the project and make sure it can really be applied in practice and doesn't stay on the shelf. Yes, that would be my worst nightmare too. After closing the project, that you have something for the bookshelf. It's not what we want. I slowly go down so that you can still have a bit of an overview of all the answers and take it in. Maybe a short question in between. Are there any ones that you particularly want to highlight? I think you can even like each other's ones, so please do so. So it's a strategy against fake news, populism, and conspiracy theories. Yeah, great if we can manage that. I forget this one. So not everybody starts from scratch, but how to do it and establish some basic standards with this quality. And the last one, to encourage policymakers to bridge the gap to their democratic constituencies. Very nice. Thank you so much. That's very helpful. I carry on. If you are, I don't think new answers are coming, so I carry on. So I hope you all manage to follow us. This is linked to what Stephen just highlighted. And I think Inge also mentioned it in the chat. Hey, you forgot the GRC toolkit. That's actually the next question. So the next question is, which resources do you know that we didn't list yet? But here first, what gaps should this protocol cover? What is different from this, whether it's a set of rules or a way of working or an approach or a guidance or a toolkit or the way you described it? So what gaps should this protocol cover according to you? What is different? What makes this one different? So a bit earlier, Stephen highlighted already a few. I will change the view again of the results. We're missing a protocol that links topics, different plural constituencies, different governance levels, to the appropriate participatory instruments, processes, and toolkits. That's very fine. I'm not familiar enough with existing guides to answer this question, but good to think about this, to not reinventing the wheel. Exactly, because there's a lot out there, and we went through some, but maybe we have not been complete yet. So even if there's already a few of them mentioned, don't hesitate and don't worry if you might reiterate one that has been mentioned before. It doesn't matter. It's good to re-highlight. So one of the gaps this one should cover is it should take into account flexibility of being applied in different regions. Nice. It covers social climate justice on different levels than before. How combinations of formats work together. Yeah, I think that's a beautiful one, especially for us. Making sure that we provide, I think, practical but scientifically valid still recommendations for making participation in Europe work. Yeah, that's potentially a gap I think it could cover. Unequal weights defined between stakeholders. Good one, yes, and that was also highlighted by Ortwin already. So procedural justice of marginalized communities, the plurality of constituent values. Very nice. So making diversity productive, in fact. Taking the planetary boundaries is specific, as is the focus on bringing participation, deliberation of stakeholders, experts, and citizens in a meaningful relation. Nice. Yes, deliberative impact assessment. Inge, you highlighted that before. I like that one a lot. Deliberative impact assessment, and also thinking of trade-off synergies. That's what comes to my mind as well. Harmonizing inputs from stakeholders, citizens, experts, marginalized groups, elected but also non-elected officials, and have them accountable to public values. So guides and toolkits existing are not available easily as a common knowledge to all citizens often. That's a very good point. Multiple guides and toolkits are available, but no awareness on which one should be referred to by which user group. Yes, I can see it later. I can not now. I cannot show it on this. Maybe I can. Yes. Filter feature is needed where users can read parts relevant to them. Yeah. Like their city, their access. Very nice. Thank you for this elaborative answer. So ensuring representation of outsider communities, concrete steps, providing sufficient funds for those who design. Yes, I think a protocol definitely. I mean, if we talk about deliberation, participation, yesterday we spoke in a bit more length about, the excess of time, that we really need to have time into the game, let's say, of policy making. And I think also investment is a very important point. I think the last one came in, I think, understanding the increasing role of digitalization within democracy and ensuring its use to enhance democracy rather than contribute to the justice divide. Beautiful, very nice. Thank you very much. I'm moving on to the next question. So this one I shared with you already earlier. What resources do you know that you would like to highlight? What's their added value? Maybe Stephen mentioned them already in the overview that he just gave. Inge, you can highlight the one of GRC as a toolkit, because that was potentially one that was missing. And once again, don't worry if some of them have been mentioned already. It doesn't matter if they are mentioned twice or 3 or 4 times. It also shows their priority. If you don't know any, that's also perfectly fine. So what resources do you know that you would like to highlight? And even if they are not finalized, maybe you say, well, the sister project, it's this beautiful democratic odyssey they are on. You should work with them. Highlight it here as well, please. So we have some of the resources coming in, the OECD guidebook. Yeah, on deliberative democracy, indeed. GRC repository. Yeah. The Aarhus Convention, yeah, cannot be missed. Definitely. The US National Academy of Science participation in environmental policymaking, clusters of democracy networks to link. Yeah, I will add, then I will not do it now, but I will add a bit later also the EU Water Framework Directive, because they have actually in the directive made a bit of a effort, not a bit, but quite an effort to really talk about the different levels of participation, information, consultation, or really active engagement in the policy-making process. So I think that's maybe one of the resources we should also take into account. Nice. Thank you so much. And maybe there are potentially others out there. And if I move to the new question and you can't enter it anymore, then just write it in the chat. So, and even if I think you can make multiple ones. Inge also highlights in the chat, we have a sister project in Horizon, which is Phoenix. We need to coin the collaboration with Democratic Odyssey differently. Yeah, good. I move on to the next ones where we discussed about resources and gaps. Now, if you think of a protocol, if you think of a guidance toolkit, if you think of rules, what is the table of contents? What are the building blocks? Is it principles? Is it tools that can be used? Is it different formats? What is out there? Yeah, a few more resources come in. That's very fine. No problem. But if you think of the building blocks, and that's why we also really asked Calypso this morning, and Ulrike spoke about it yesterday as well. Think of the modules also highlighted in the Democratic Odyssey, because we wanted to use that as a bit of inspiration. So what are the building blocks? A combination of suitable formats that address the 3 research questions. Nice, very nice, yeah. Yeah. What are other building blocks that you think of? Should we go into depth about the different potential formats of deliberation? Or really not, because other guidelines, toolkits did that already. What are building blocks that you find really important? And even if other guidance documents or toolkits or protocols, which word you would like to use, would you still highlight, even though others have them already, because we work in a bit a different way? So the ethics, okay, best practice, advice for including stakeholders, scientists, citizens, and marginalized groups, block on how to do the recruitment of participants, okay, yeah. The rationale for the choices, how to create safe spaces, nice. Nice. I also liked for instance, making a bridge with the question that Ulrike asked to Ortwin. How do we actually bridge making consensus, maybe agreeing to disagree? And Ortwin also highlighted the different relative weights. Nobody is there to really disagree. Some exceptions, but how do you deal with these different relative weights to values people give? How do you deal with that? So participation on different governance levels is mentioned. Nice one indeed. So I go once more to the end, just for you to give the overview. Better methods for fair and effective conflict resolution. Yeah. Ulrike, thank you very much for being here. I see that you have to leave. Please stay in touch indeed. What Calypso said about rediscovering randomness, absolutely beautiful. Thank you very much for putting that one out there, because I think that is a very important one. Trust of citizens, highlighted by Yves Mathieu yesterday also, absolutely. He highlighted that very nicely. Opening the windows, the doors, policymakers need to really embed citizen engagement as the new normal. Great. There are a few, not too many, few more questions. Transparency as a building block. So I'm going to swap to the next one. And if you have more that you would like to highlight, please do not hesitate. With whom should this protocol be developed? Might be a quick one, because I think that's, well, with all of you here. That's maybe also the next question. With whom should this protocol be developed? Maybe you say, yeah, you know, I see the partners in your consortium. Yes, nice, but where are the policymakers? Maybe you want us to find ways to include policymakers. Or maybe you would say, for the specific topics that you are focusing on, really get in touch with practitioners. With whom should this protocol be developed, in your view? Except with the partners. The public, CSO, policymakers, scientific experts. Okay, yeah. So the public, CSOs definitely are involved. Scientific experts, yes, we will find formats. Policymakers on all governance levels. That's a cool one, not an easy one. Not easy for us to, but I agree, it is something that we should challenge ourselves with. Someone the public can identify with, nice. Main actors in economy, science, politics, and civil society, with the community in the TNOCA network, civil society organizations engaged on the topic of participation, social justice, environmental justice, with citizens who've participated in deliberative processes. Yeah, nice. I want to open this one shortly. Yes, I was thinking indeed the conference on futures of Europe, because we highlighted it yesterday as well. So thank you for putting that there. Of course, with the Democratic Odyssey Consortium, decision makers, great. Okay, now a very personal question. If something comes up, different user groups, yeah, great. Ah, nice one. Public influencers like celebrities. Okay. That will be an extra effort indeed. Nice. Okay. The next question is especially for those that are not necessarily in our consortium, So the protocol needs to be co-designed. We agree to that. Would you like to be involved or think along? Well, for all of my colleagues who are in the project, you are of course going to say yes, but I would like to have a bit of a feel like how many people else than us would like to be involved. So I hope we say only yeses, but so that means that we have to keep in touch with all of you. So also the people who are here and here for the first time about the Real Deal project. Okay, I find the next question, and also considering the time, I find the next question more important, because this is maybe a difficult question on your phone or on the computer. I don't know how it exactly looks for you, but if you want to be informed about the progress, so if you want to be involved and if you want to be informed, just informed, can you share with us, do you mean then in workshops like these? Or maybe you want to just receive updates, or maybe on the website? Tell us, please. But if you want to be consulted, then tell us how you wish to do that. Is that, shall we give you a phone call from time to time? I think that will be hard, but let's see what we can do. So if you want to be consulted, so really give your opinion. How do you want us to get in touch with you? Now, if you want to be actively involved, so that you see the 3 different levels of participation here, then what way would you suggest? How would you then actively like to be involved about the development? And maybe you say, yeah, it's something in between. I don't know. I don't want necessarily only to be involved or consulted or actively involved. I want to be really think along much deeper. So maybe there are other ways that you would like to engage with us. So in what way would you prefer to be involved? So let's see if, and then we will stop and close, we will wrap up. So maybe I stop share, because I think it's also, I leave this okay. Leave this open. Online, live meetings, offline meetings, in workshops, okay? More in-person sessions, sharing knowledge and experience. Great, yeah, that would be lovely, okay? So if you would like to share a bit more, but there seems to be that the people are here. Okay, great. So we have, in the different categories, we all have different ways of how you would like to be informed. Maybe newsletters to follow the process. Nice, thank you. Thank you very much for that. So I will stop sharing the screen here, because the answers can still come in, and you can see the answers yourself of others also. But because it's already 12 o'clock, I always hate how fast time goes. But is there anything that you would still like to ask one of our panelists? Maybe you would like to, maybe you said it already in this quick and dirty survey that we pulled up. Is there anything you would like to push forward? Anything that you would like to highlight? Maybe some of my colleagues that something that they are impressed about, that it was mentioned, maybe the gaps or the resources. Any questions or any comments that you would like to give? Yeah, I see. Inge, thank you, Inge. That's Inge, would you like to say something? And or maybe I see your remark in the chat, but please feel free.
Yeah, I can have a final word, but wait whether it's...
Yeah. Anybody else? Things that came to your attention, things that you say like, wow, that was indeed interesting. That was nice how it was said by others. Because so all your things are registered, of course, so we can share that also. Elsa, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Well, what I really liked in the, I don't know what the name was called of this online quiz thing, but is that in the beginning that people said something like a roadmap or a decision tree or something, I don't know, more flexible maybe, where you can choose paths or something. I found that very interesting. So I'm thinking about it now. How would that look like? And things like that. Yeah.
Nice. Thank you, Elsa. I agree with you. There are nice things out there that we didn't have on our, in our ideas or in our heads. Yeah, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you. So, oops, here we are. Okay.
Yes,
apologies.
you are back.
Yes, thank
No
you.
worries.
First of all, thank you so much for this great event. It's been very informative and a great pleasure to listen in and to participate. So well done, all of you. What stands out for me with regards to this protocol, this final wrap-up session, is that there is what could be perceived as a tension, this pan-European debate, these more slow onset, longer term processes that with uncertain outcome, that we want to facilitate this new deliberative turn. Yeah. That's one thing. And the other thing, on the other hand, there's this decision making, this focus on decision making, on concrete processes with very concrete impacts. And that might be perceived as sort of a discrepancy, but in the discussions and in the inputs, I think we explored some middle ground, how we can bridge both those and bring together both of those elements, because they are equally important. I think we all agree that both these, this cultural aspect, this deliberative debate as a social process is important, as well as the very much focusing on specific outcomes oriented decision-making process.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much, Pia, for that highlight. So maybe if there are no other questions also, I would like to say, because we are already 8 minutes past time, but thank you very much. And if you still have ideas, don't hesitate to email us and get in touch with us. And Brooke, and maybe you can share that with everyone, with the attendees who are still here. Inge, some last reflections?
Yeah, I think most people already left. So I just remain saying again, thank you to you, and really for a great pre-summit. It was very timely for the three purposes we had in presenting our project to the outside world, to get an update on EU policies, and to kick off this framing and scoping of the protocol. For us, then in preparation, it was also to reframe and to get a stronger grip to our research questions again. So this was very useful, both internal and external. And external, I'm very happy that we have now this quite good links to EU policymakers who are really activists in the scene, and that we learned everything about the democratic odyssey, which will be, I think, a very useful and fruitful partner in the rest of the time of our project.
Yeah,
Thanks.
Great. Thank you so much. Stephen.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, I do want to say thank you very much to Esther and Inga for moderating and really being, kind of a guiding force in these last 2 days. As the task leader on the protocol, this has been extremely useful. And I think it really has set the stage and defined a course for us to take going forward. And I know there were other things that happened these last 2 days that were not that much related to the protocol development. We had a great opportunity for all of our consortium partners to touch base about a number of issues. We had a chance to bring in outside participants and attendees that may not have been aware of some of the things we're doing. So a lot of things were achieved in these last couple of days. So I want to thank everyone on behalf of the CEU Democracy Institute. I also want to, besides Esther and Inga, I want to thank our speakers and our panelists, and I want to thank the attendees. And I also want to give a special thanks to our team, Brooke Moore and Judith Sakac, who made sure that everything went smoothly in terms of participation and flow of information, and Abel Jadon, who helped us with the technical aspects, which I think, we had a couple of glitches here and there, but I think overall we got done what we wanted to get done, which I appreciate very much. And for those of you who have signaled your interest in continuing this work, we'll be in touch with you soon and find ways for you to be involved. So thanks again. Thanks for all your attention and your participation.
Great. Have a very pleasant lunch, because I think all of us are in that time zone. So, and please keep in touch, because it has been very, very resourceful for us. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.